So, Jordie, I think it's pretty safe to say that one of the kind of core pillars of a democracy is having a free press.
Yes, definitely, for sure.
You'd agree with that statement?
I could not agree more, yes.
What about the Australian press? Do you think Australia has a free press?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
On the surface, we do have a free press here in Australia.
Theoretically.
However, once you kind of go past that thin layer, you see that there are kind of systems of censorship and control that do limit the kinds of journalists that appear in the Australian press.
Yeah.
And the story that we're going to discuss today illustrates that perfectly.
Absolutely.
So Chris Hedges, a renowned global journalist and former war correspondent who wrote for the New York Times 20 years ago.
Is he a Pulitzer Prize winning
journalist.
and author? Yeah. One of
He-
our favourite, I'd say mutual favourite authors.
Correct.
Yeah.
A book up here on the mantle.
Yeah. He has a place on the mantle. Yeah.
He does. So anyway, Chris Hedges was meant to speak at the National Press Club here in Australia, Canberra, in a couple of weeks, I think next week or the week after potentially. And it was confirmed that he was going to speak, and his topic for discussion was the portrayal of Palestinian journalists.
A bit of a sensitive topic for the Australian press, would you say?
It is, yeah. So the National Press Club in Canberra usually holds speeches and discussions on contemporary Australian affairs and politics. It's where academics, journalists, politicians usually speak and will put forwards an idea or a policy or a discussion that usually then is adopted into the Australian press that then gets kind of discussed further.
Yeah.
It's sort of how our press, like how an open press should operate.
Yes, the idea is that it kind of, they provide topics and it kind of stimulates debate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, of course. And we've, on the show, obviously, we've referenced numerous clips and discussions that have been had at the Australian Press Gallery, the National Press Club. So we've had like Francesca Albanese.
Yes.
Paul Keating. We've had a good a few Paul Keating clips up there.
Yeah.
That have
Scott
been memorable.
Farquhar, one of Australia's AI kind of overlords.
Of course, I forgot about Scott Farquhar.
Yeah, one of our tech bros.
Yep. So they've cancelled Chris Hedges?
They've revoked his speaking position. So he was invited to come and talk, as I said, on the topic of the portrayal of Palestinian journalists. And from my understanding, this is what Chris has said, is that the position was offered to him, he accepted it, and then the Australian Press Club then posted on social media confirming Chris Hedges' position. And then deleted the post, but people had screenshotted it before they deleted it.
So you'd assume they got maybe someone from higher up, essentially.
Well, we'll get onto that in a second.
Okay, absolutely. I think Chris Hedges would actually be the perfect person to speak at the National Press Club in
Definitely.
Canberra.
Well, you'd think so.
Being like a seasoned war correspondent.
A man that writes speeches for politicians. He's very well spoken and elegant.
A Presbyterian minister.
Possibly
one of the most kind of humane voices in politics that I've ever heard in contemporary politics.
Yep.
But I guess all those things, while we'd think they'd be qualifications that would make him exceptional and be the perfect candidate to speak there, I guess all these qualities actually are probably massive detractions, because the Australian press corps, shall we say, is pretty subservient.
Yes, that's exactly right. So they revoked his speaking position, and there's other people who were meant to speak on the day as well. So I believe it was Chris Hedges from the United Nations, who we played the other week. He headed the UN Commission, I believe, that just found Israel guilty of 4 of the 5 requirements of genocide. Correct. So he was going to speak, and several other people were going to speak as well, alongside Chris. And so anyway, so his position was revoked. And James, I was curious about this. I've been reading a few articles, and it turns out that some of the sponsors of the press club are quite interesting who they are.
Enlighten me, Jordie.
So, several major Australian corporations. One of the primary funders of the press club, or donors, should I say, is Westpac.
Oh, the bank.
One of the big 4 banks.
Interesting, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, to no surprise. However, once you look into it a little bit more, there's some more nefarious characters, should I say. So there is...
It's not like brought to you by Lockheed Martin.
Well, there is the...
Oh, no.
there's the French weapons company, Thales, who operates here in Australia.
Thales,
yeah. As well as the US weapon companies Raytheon and Lockheed Martin.
You're kidding.
Not joking.
I was joking when I said that, by the way.
No, I'm 100% serious.
Oh.
So, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin sponsor and provide funds to the National Press Club. And they also supply weapons to Israel, who are carrying out the slaughter in Gaza at the moment.
Fair enough. Well, I guess it's a miracle that even Francesca Albanese was allowed to speak there originally. Right. Maybe she won't be allowed to come back.
Yeah, and it's also, Chris did say in one of his interviews that apparently there's considerations for the Israeli ambassador to speak.
Of course there is. Yeah. So they can have the Israeli ambassador on, who represents... He heads up the ambassadorial mission of a country who is pretty plausibly and conclusively have been condemned for committing a genocide, and he's allowed to speak, but the person that would be critical of him, or could potentially be critical of him, not even directly, but possibly even indirectly, he is not allowed to speak.
Yeah, so look, James, this is speculation. The Press Club has denied that there's been any pressure from any outside sources to cancel Chris Hedges. However...
So what was their explanation?
Their explanation was that they wanted a more balanced and nuanced perspective of the Palestinian topic. And I think Chris Hedges may have tilted the balance in one way, should we say.
Well, that's interesting because most of the Australian media seems to lean on one particular side of the issue.
Yeah. So, look, James, let's give the Press Club the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, I'm sure they probably just booked in too many people. Chris is at the bottom of the list. They ticked him off.
Yeah.
However...
There's an administrative error entirely.
An administrative error. Yeah. And, an AI hallucination or something. But what I think happened, and this is just speculation, I don't have any evidence for this, is that there is significant pressure inside the Australian media by the Israel lobby here in Australia to silence critics of Israel. And especially someone like Chris Hedges, who just wrote a book called The Genocide Foretold, Stories from Gaza, who is, very critical of Western foreign policy, of the genocide in Gaza at the moment. And his speech, where the topic was the betrayal of Palestinian journalists, I don't think that the Australian media and journalist class could stomach what he had to say.
No, I think I agree, because I think... that would imply that they would be complicit.
Yeah.
I think because they have towed the Israeli line the entire time. I think over 200 journalists have been killed in Gaza in this conflict alone. Chris Hedges himself has reported from Gaza in the past. He's always been a strong advocate of Palestinian issues, being an Arabic speaker himself. But that's really fascinating.
Because what he would have done is that I think he would have pointed the finger at the Western press and media for being very silent on what's going on, for being complicit in the murder of their fellow colleagues. And I think he would have highlighted Australia's complicity in that. He would have done his research, and I just don't think that the...
they wouldn't like that. Because
I don't think the journalists could stomach it.
As we know, they are a spineless amoeba that inhabit these halls.
Yes.
And I think a man of Chris Hedges' stature... I honestly do not think they'd be able to comprehend or handle having an actual proper journalist who's been on the ground, who's reported on numerous conflicts, and has a very, shall I say, watertight position, infallible position on the subject. I don't think they'd have the fortitude.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd be able to take it. I think they'd all just turn to liquid in front of him.
Yes,
literally,
right.
not metaphorically,
It is very sad, though, but this does illustrate how censorship works here in Australia. Obviously, there's always speculation and kind of assertion against China that they obviously don't have a free and open press, that they silence dissent, etc., etc. However, this happens in Western liberal democracies all the time, and this perfectly illustrates it.
Of course, and we can look at, obviously, the ownership structures of our main corporate media.
And the corporate donors.
And the corporate
donors that allow these organisations to run.
But exactly, because I made a joke earlier. I said, brought to you by Lockheed Martin. And you said, no, it actually is brought to us by Lockheed Martin. And it makes you think, why would a weapons company, here's me, just benefit of the doubt, why would a weapons company be sponsoring a press event? Well, there's only one reason. There's only one reason that we can think of.
To dictate the kind of conversations that are happening here in Australia at a national level.
So I guess coming back to the original point, that is a fallacy in our democracy.
It is.
The fact that we don't have a free press.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But it works in much more nuanced and complex ways. So obviously if you kind of look at the old school Soviet model, it was very just like top down. You had the kind of the government, the state apparatus that owned the press. That was your source of media. Obviously, there's more nuances to that. However, here in Australia and in the West, there's these filtration systems. Chomsky obviously talks about this in his Manufacturing of Consent.
Yep.
There are really complex levels of filtration that ensure that voices like Chris Hedges don't get a position in the mainstream media.
And we saw Antoinette Lattouf, for example, in the ABC.
Yes.
Her dismissal, and I think that kind of reflects the same situation.
And that was at the behest of the Israel lobby that were pressuring the ABC executives.
So I guess the the ABC is not an Australian state broadcaster. It's an Israeli state broadcaster, I guess, by that analogy. Yeah. But it is really twisted, and it's really sad, because I honestly think that, obviously I was kind of shitting on the journalist class earlier. Yeah. I actually do think we have lots of really good journalists in Australia.
Yeah, we do. No, we do.
And I don't want to actually disparage lots of the individuals, but I think the editorial control that's exerted upon them is something that they can't overcome. And obviously the independent media is growing in Australia, but it's not as strong as it is in the United States.
No, definitely
for example.
not.
And lots of these people don't want to lose their jobs, lose their careers, etc. And also, I think you can tell, because even when we look at a Francesca Albanese speech, I think over a year and a half ago now, she got raucous applause from all the journalists. They obviously are aware of what's
I think there's a division
happening.
there, though.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a majority.
But I think this issue transcends ideological bounds, though, to a certain extent. To a certain extent, because they're talking about just the raw human carnage and the suffering and the objective complicity of these states and institutions. And I think lots of the press, regardless of their surface level ideological affiliations, can connect to that. Obviously, you still always have your...
Unless you operate within the Sky News Murdoch sphere.
Of course. Obviously, you still have your Sharry Marksons who are getting exclusive scoops with BB, etc., etc. Yeah. But what a shame. What an absolute shame.
It's a shame. Look, I was shocked when I saw that Chris Hedges was going to speak at the National Press Club. Because as you said, I just don't think they could handle his moral conviction.
No.
I just don't think they could deal with it.
I highly doubt it.
Because he delivers the way he speaks. It's like a sermon.
It is.
I just don't think they could sit through it.
No, definitely not. I agree. Yeah. I agree. And what a massive shame. Yeah. And a massive loss.
However, James, just a little personal anecdote. We are going to be listening to Chris Hedges speak next week here in Adelaide. So we will be looking forward to that. Hopefully the Israel lobby and the weapons industry don't silence him.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't get taken out by a drone strike or something. Yeah.